Good evening, everyone. My name is Basha Dudek. I'm an Education USA advisor here at the Fulbright Commission. I'd like to thank you all for turning in to this webinar today. I'm joined by my colleague, Rowena.
Hi everyone, my name's Rowena. I'm an Education USA advisor at the Fulbright Commission here in the UK, and along with Basha, I love giving out great advice for anyone who's interested in studying in the United States. I got to go during my studies, and it was easily one of the very best things I ever did with my life, and so it's great to have a job where we can help you achieve those dreams if that's something you'd like to do as well. Back over to you, Basha.
Thanks, Rowena. So tonight we'll be going over how to choose your university, the funding available, and how to apply for US study. And we will also have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, you could drop those in the Q&A box and we'll answer those at the end. And just a reminder that the session is recorded. So if you miss anything, you could have a look at it later on. Next slide, please. So what is the US-UK Fulbright Commission? We are a not-for-profit organization that's jointly funded by the US and the UK government to promote peace and cultural understanding throughout educational exchange. And we focus on opportunities and exchanges between US and the UK as part of a global program. So how do we promote educational exchange at Fulbright? Well, we do this by offering scholarships for postgraduate students and research in the US and UK, and by providing an advisory service to assist students, parents, and advisors with applying for US universities. Now, this advisory service is part of Education USA Network, which is a US Department of State network of over 400 international student advising centers throughout the world. And our aim at Education USA as Education USA advisors is to offer free and unbiased advice to UK students who want to study in the US. And we are also the only official source of US study in the UK. Next, please. So why study in the US? Well, there are a variety of different reasons, but we'll go through some of the most important ones in the next few slides. And once again, if you have any questions while we go through this, please pop them in the Q&A box. Next, please. So some of the reasons include a wide range of choices. There are over 1,700 universities in the US offering postgraduate degrees. Now that's compared to only about 120 here in the UK. So there's a lot of variety in the institutions and also among the academic departments that are available for you to study in. It gives you an opportunity to internationalize your CV. So many employers cite that cross-cultural experience is a very attractive quality for their employee. It's also helpful to have a diverse experience, and you could demonstrate independence that's necessary to study abroad in a different country. It gives you an opportunity for global networking. So going to the US not only gives you an opportunity to form networks with American faculty and institutions, but also with the diverse colleagues that make up many universities in the US from all over the world. You'll gain practical experience. So there are many opportunities for hands-on research, internships, and teaching opportunities in the US. And you could expand your horizons. Living and studying in another country expands your worldwide view, and it may expand the opportunities that are available to you in the future. And there's also a lot of funding opportunities, which might surprise some of you, but this is the top reason to study in the US. It's the funding opportunities. There are a lot of funding schemes and scholarships that are available, especially on the postgraduate level, which we will talk about later. Next, please. So what are the differences between the US and UK studies? So one of the main differences is the duration of studying. Typically, the US programs are longer. So usually they have a 2-year master's although there are some one-year programs out there in the US, but most of the master programs last 2 years as compared to 1 year here in the UK. And PhDs are between 4 to 6 years, although once again, this might be more or less depending on the program or the department that you are part of. There's also an integrated master's in the PhD in the first year or two of the coursework in the US. And those that have a master's can use this time to sharpen skills or to gain even more experience teaching or doing research as an assistant. And this typically is not an optional component of the degree. So every student has to take that coursework during their first 1 or 2 years of the PhD. There's also no pure research degrees in the US, so programs include coursework on the postgraduate level as well, unlike here in the UK where there isn't much coursework, or in some instances there's no coursework at all, you just do your postgraduate study. And there are no set fees or standard application deadlines. There's a great variance between universities and departments in regards to what fees they charge and when their deadlines are for postgraduate studies. Postgraduate programs are also organized by the department, so it's not done by the supervisor, and you don't need to know a supervisor or have one picked out beforehand, especially since more programs are more interdisciplinary, which means that you may have multiple supervisors, or you might even have a committee that you work with. And you do not need to have in-depth research proposal. So they expect you to figure this out throughout the program once you're there already. And another difference is that law and medicine are actually studied at the postgraduate level in the US. So unlike the UK, where it's you could do law and medicine in undergrad, in US is strictly on the postgraduate level. Next, please. So what is the timeline that you should be looking at? We recommend that you begin your research into the programs between 12 to 18 months before you plan to enroll. Then you would finalize a selection of between 3 to 6 universities or programs where you will be applying to around 10 to 12 months before you plan to enroll. And around the same time, you want to take any required admissions exams and begin your applications. About 8 to 10 months before, you will put together an application and you will submit that according to the deadlines. Now, remember that different universities and programs will have the different deadlines, so that 8 to 10 months period might vary between programs. And around 4 to 7 months beforehand, so in the spring before you enroll, you can expect to hear back from universities you apply to with their admissions decision. And based off of where you were accepted, you would notify universities of your decision and apply for your visa between 1 to 3 months before the enrollment. Now, we have some resources on our website to help with your pre-departure, including things like travel advice, living arrangements, what the campus life looks like, etc. And you would typically start your degree in mid-August to early September. So this, once again, is slightly earlier than in the UK. So that's the recommended timeline that we suggest. And I'm going to hand it over to Rowena.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Basha. So getting started on this question, Basha was talking about this process of researching universities, and I really just want to put the emphasis out there on that process of researching universities. A lot of students who I see being successful in getting into a graduate program in the US, getting funding for a graduate program, tends to be people who have done their research and have really thought about where their program, what a program is going to be a good fit for them. So the more open-minded and the more flexible you can be in this process, the better it's going to be and the higher chance of success you're going to have. So there are more than 1,700 institutions in the US who offer postgraduate programs. So there's lots of different options and a lot of different types of style of university, and also within that, individual departments within a university, which can mean that you've got a huge amount of choice, but you've also got a real chance to find a program and find a department that is going to be a really good fit for you and what you're looking for from your education. So you might be wondering, how do you go about trying to figure out what is going to be a good university for me to apply to? What is a good program for me to apply to? So a term we use a lot at Fulbright is this idea of fit. And what this means is you want to find a program that is going to be a really good fit for what you're looking for from a university, from a program, from a department, but it's also that you're the right fit for what they're looking for you. And if you can meet what they're looking for and they can meet what you're looking for, that's the sense of fit. And sometimes students that we work with sometimes if they haven't quite grasped this, that's where you get this mismatch of expectations and potentially not leading to successful applications. So you want to find a program that is going to be the best fit for you and your personal and academic interests. So the first thing, how do you go about figuring out what is your fit? Well, the first thing to do is figure out what factors are important to you. And everybody is going to have different factors that are important to them as they weigh up the different universities and the different programs on offer. So what you want to do is, rather than just jumping into like, I've heard of this university and I want to jump in there, or something that you've heard of perhaps from a friend or a colleague, is to start thinking about what are the things that are important to you, and can you then start to create a list of universities that is going to meet those factors and going to be important and a good fit for you. So what are these kind of factors to consider? Well, you can start to think about all sorts of different types of factors, and again, this is going to be different person to person. My sense of fit will be different to Basha's sense of fit, so everybody kind of needs to do this work on their own to figure out what is a good fit. So you can start to think about the different types of institutions available. Do you want to be at a very large state university, perhaps the epicenter in that state of research, of collaboration, where there's a lot of grants coming in, where there is a large student body, where there is perhaps professors leading research that's kind of super specialized, lots of labs, all of those kind of things? Or maybe you're actually looking for a private university and you're looking for perhaps a smaller institution where you're going to be on a much more collegiate relationship with the faculty at the university. You're going to be creating really strong individual networks with faculty who might be helping your academic or professional career in the future. Each institution is different. Each university in the US has a really strong, distinctive personality. And then within that, each department is really different as well. So that could be another way that you start to think about the kind of different areas. Finding the right department is almost as important as choosing the right university when you're looking at graduate study in the US. That's what Americans call postgrad study, as we call it here. So finding the right department with the right vibe for you will really influence so much of your experience in the US. And at postgraduate level, at graduate level in the US, it's the academic department that generally handles everything from admissions, perhaps course structure. They will be the ones monitoring a student's progression through the program, and kind of offering a lot of the extracurricular kind of opportunities as well. So it's really essential to research the department and find the right academic home for you. But you could also be thinking about the type of program that you're looking for. And that's arguably more important than which university you're looking at, is thinking about the program. So thinking about your career goals. Are you looking for a career in academia or something like that? Maybe a PhD program is a really good fit. Maybe you're thinking about a career in business and something like the MBA, which the US is the home of the MBA. Maybe that's a better fit. You might be thinking about the qualifications that you've got already. Maybe you're looking for a program that is more general in scope because it's an area that you haven't studied before, or maybe you're looking for a deep dive into a particular area that you've already got a first degree in. Are you looking for a program that's going to have funded internship opportunities? Or are you looking for a program where there's going to be grant writing experience or an opportunity to have hands-on experience in the lab? All of these things are things to think about, and each program is going to be different on these fronts. You can also start to think about, when you're thinking about your department, you can think about the different things that make up that department. So the areas of faculty expertise, if you're really into, say, nuclear physics, you may have a different list than somebody who's really into, I don't know, environmental science. The areas of faculty expertise, the grants that they're bringing in, the research happening is going to be really different between different departments, different institutions. You might be also thinking about looking at the different elective courses available to students in that particular department. Are there concentrations? Okay, so great, you're looking at an MBA, but maybe you're also then looking with an MBA that has a concentration in entrepreneurship. That may be a focus for you. You might be looking at kind of programs that are much more interdisciplinary, or whether they're really tightly focused on a particular area. You might be looking for big programs or little programs. Everyone's got a preference, and there's no right or wrong on any of these things, but you just want to be thinking about all these factors and what do you want out of your experience at studying at a US university. You might be thinking also about things like opportunities for teaching or research or conference attendance, any of those kind of things as well. You might also think about the kind of locations. The US is a massive country spanning 6 time zones. And so you might be thinking about the different parts of the US and their relationship to the land, and therefore how that influences the research. But you might also be thinking about the kind of quality of life that you're looking for. Maybe you want to be in the middle of a big city, but perhaps you want to be at an institution that has a more of a college town basis where you can go skiing at the weekend. Both are different experiences. Maybe you are a big fan of kind of sunny areas, in which case possibly New England is not for you in the winter. Or maybe actually snow sports is your thing, or you want to get into it, and that could influence your choice. You could be thinking about access to transportation options. How far away, how easy do you want it to be to get back and forth from the UK? But also, how easy is it, are you going to have a car when you live there? Therefore, if you're not going to have a car, you might be wanting to think about perhaps a college town or a college city that has really good public transport. You might be wanting to think about centres of excellence in your field, so either something like perhaps Washington, DC, if it's political science, or thinking about finance. Perhaps you would then start looking at New York State, somewhere around there. And you'll be wanting to think about the extracurricular activities that are available. And then finally, you also want to think about finances. We're going to talk more about this later in the webinar, but if funding is important to you, then this needs to be part of the choosing process right from the beginning. Oftentimes the funding is awarded and applied for alongside the application process. And Basha and I get a lot of emails from people later on the year who have been offered a place at their dream university, but they haven't thought about the funding, and either the funding wasn't available or they missed the deadlines for applying for that funding. So we really encourage you to start thinking about that from the get-go. Make sure that you're applying for the funding as you go, if the funding is available, and that you don't start thinking about it after you've applied and been accepted, because that might be just too late, and we don't want you to be disappointed down the line. Okay, so with all of those factors, how do you go about then narrowing down your options? So our website has a page on choosing a university, and I'm hoping Basha is going to pop a link in the chat right now. It includes like a list of links to helpful search engines. These are search engines designed to help people find graduate programs and lists all sorts of different programs in all sorts of different departments. Some of the most famous ones are like Petersons and gradschools.com, but they're a really great place to start filtering alongside your potential program, the area of focus, but also you can start to use some of those factors that you've figured out whether they're important or not to you to start to hone your choices. You could also, if you have good connections to previous professors, you should totally use that network. see if they have any advice or opinions that could be a good school for you, or potentially even professional contacts that they could put you in touch with, which could be a real leg up for your application. You could also be looking at professionals or colleagues in your field, and then starting to suggest perhaps areas. So maybe you have a colleague who has done an MBA in the US, and perhaps they can recommend some MBA schools that might be of interest, and business schools that might be of interest, things like that. You can think about you know, your particular discipline will influence the choices that you're making. You can think through some of the work that some scholars have previously, you know, some of the scholars that perhaps you admire, whether that's textbooks or research papers. You know, who are they and where are they based? Have a little look around. Can you see anyone you've identified as doing the kind of research you'd like to do? What university are they based at? Can you find that out a bit more? And where are they teaching? Could you go and have a look at that? What are their colleagues working on? So what you want to do is start from a really wide range of universities where you're looking at all sorts of different options. If it were me, I would have a spreadsheet to organize my research. And then you want to start to narrow down your options into something around 10 institutions or so to research a bit further. So we've actually got just a quick screenshot here of the Petersons tool, again on the link that Bash has shared. Petersons this is one of those grad school search tools. It's particularly helpful to help you decide and rank what factors are important to you for choosing a university. So you can start to use this to help you. And we'll use an example here of anthropology. So look for a graduate level program in this field. So anthropology search, you can start to see here a list of results with different universities with programs in anthropology. On that left hand side bar, you can use a variety of different factors to start to slimline that list down. So it could be degree type, could be tuition, it could be school size, it could be location, to start pulling that list down into a much more manageable list to research. And that's the thing, is once you've narrowed your research down to about 10 universities or programs of interest, that's where you really want to go deep dive on your research and really find out more about them. You can look at the university website, you can reach out to them directly. US universities kind of expect to hear from prospective applicants, so don't feel reserved or weird about reaching out, just a real encouragement to do so. And ultimately you're looking to start to identify perhaps 3 to 6 institutions where you'll actually submit an application. So when you're looking at the university websites, what are you looking for? US university websites tend to be really good in terms of the information they have. You can find out more information on the faculty in that department. Sometimes you can even see their CVs, you can see their research interests, publications, grant information, current work, all of those things. You can find specific information on the professors to reach out to and making sure they're still working on something that interests you. You can also think about how to reach out to current grad students. So there's nothing quite like speaking to someone who's already doing the program. So have a look at their experience, reach out to them. You'll find their details on the university websites or on LinkedIn. You can have a look at what kind of projects they're working on, how close are the relationships between the professors and graduate students, how close are they with their supervisors, what's the campus culture like. And you can also ask more broad questions about what the local area is like, you know, cost of living, how to find an apartment, all of those things. If you want to speak with a student and you can't find any contact information, feel free to email the department. They can normally put you in touch via email with a current student. And this can be a really great way of determining what it's like to actually study there. Okay, I'm going to hand back over to Basha.
Thank you, Rowena. So now you know how to choose your university, but how do you find your studies? So funding is one of the top things that we get asked here at Fulbright and Education USA. And there's a big misconception that US university is always more expensive. But the good news is that there is significant amount of funding available, especially on the postgraduate level, particularly if you are willing to be flexible and go into the process with an open mind. Next slide, please. So what are the sources of funding available, and where does the money come from? There are 4 types of funding for a study in the USA. So the first one is personal or family funds. There's a big culture in the US of saving and paying for university in a way that we don't have here in the UK because we do have the loan-based system. And there is an expectation that you will make a contribution to your studies in some way from your personal funds or from family funds as well. Another source of funding is the university. This is probably the best resource for funding, and it has 2 most common types of university-based funding. So the first one is a fellowship. So this is an outright grant to allow recipients to focus solely on your own work. The second one is an assistantships, and these are offered in return for a service provided to the department. So it might be that you might have to do some teaching for the university, or maybe be part of some type of research. Maybe you're going to be a lab supervisor or work in a campus office in exchange for fees waived, health insurance, and sometimes even a stipend. Now, assistantships are renewable year to year if the student maintains a specific academic standard. So it's very important that if you do get an assistantship, you actually do what it requires you to do in order to be able to renew it year by year during your studies. Now, the terms of assistantships will vary dramatically between universities and even between the departments. So it will depend on what available grants there are in the departments at the university, what field of study it's on, and what are the departmental needs during that year. This is why it's very important to ask the department or the program that you're interested in about this kind of funding when you are choosing where to apply. This is why we like to reiterate, if funding is important to you, it's something that you look for whilst you're choosing where you want to study. There is more funding generally available for PhDs and students in research-focused masters than the professional degree students. This also varies by subject area as well. So, for example, the sciences tend to receive more funding than programs in the humanities, for example. But it's important to check with multiple offices about funding opportunities. So make sure you check with the department that you'll be part of, the graduate school as well, if the university has one, and the financial aid office, as you might be able to pull funding from different offices as well. There's also external funding bodies, and these usually are niche scholarships from institutions that are completely separate to universities. And these might be various companies, maybe charities or foundations that offer scholarships to postgraduate students at certain universities, or maybe in certain degrees or professions. And there's also loans. Now, most US lenders will require a UK or an international student to have a US citizen to co-sign on a loan. Therefore, most UK citizens would need to take out a private loan here in the UK. However, we would highly encourage you to examine the terms and conditions and interest closely, as there might be other opportunities for funding that you could find. Now, if you are an American or dual US and UK citizen, you could take out a loan from a US lender and apply for a US federal loan through FAFSA as well. We'd like to recommend that the university and external funding is the preferred option for funding your studies, since you don't actually have to pay the money back. And it's the preferred way to fund your studies. And once again, like Rowena mentioned, and I mentioned before, that if you do keep an open mind, there are plenty of opportunities for you to find funding that will cover your studies as well. Next slide, please. So we'd like to advise on a funding strategy to try and lower your costs and manage expenses for your studies. So there's three different approaches that you might want to take. So the first one would be to reduce the cost of living. So just like in the UK, if you live in London, it's going to be more expensive than if you live in Lancaster. It's the same in the US. If you live in a rural area like New York or LA, it's going to be more expensive than if you live somewhere urban, like, for example, in the Midwest in Ohio or in a city in Michigan. So when you're researching your universities, keep that in mind, that you could reduce the cost of living to save some money, and look at different options for that. You could also look at lowering the tuition costs. So public universities, which are state funded, will generally have lower costs than many private universities. However, keep in mind that private universities might have more funding available for you, and funding will vary by department within each university. So it's very important when you do your research that you actually contact the department and find out how much funding is available, if you qualify for that funding. What are the different universities offering you as an international student in regard to funding? Which one is more affordable? Which one has a lower tuition? And which one will give you the most amount of money to meet those needs? You could also look for university funding in addition to the ways that we've already talked about. You could look for funding outside of your program. So for example, if you want to study architecture, but you might have an interest in environmental architecture and making buildings more green, you could seek funding from two different departments at that university. So keep that in mind as well once you're doing your research. Now, important thing to keep in mind is that you might be able to combine these three strategies together. You might find that universities with low tuition have fewer funding opportunities. However, you might be able to find some external funding as well to make up the cost. And obviously the lower tuition will mean lower costs as well. So beware of the different factors that play in this strategy as well. Next slide, please. So here's an example of two different universities. So they're both located in Boston. There's Boston University, and the cost of attendance with the Department of Education and Human Development at Boston University is over $85,000. That includes tuition, room and board, and other fees. Now, if you compare that to an MA at the University of Massachusetts in Boston as well, the tuition and off-campus finances would be almost $40,000 less. So it's the same city. It has a great variance in tuition and fees. So make sure that you stay open-minded. And like Rowena mentioned before, just because you heard of the university doesn't mean it will be the right fit for you. So it's important, if funding is something that you need to cover the cost, that you do keep that open mind and you do your research. Now, sometimes close universities also have links and relationships with each other. So you might be able to take classes, for example, at Boston University, if you're a student at University of Massachusetts as well. So if you're on the website, you could find out information at the university's website. It will tell you if they have any kind of relationships with other close universities. And I'm going to hand it over to Rina.
Great stuff. And just to finish out a thought on this this particular example, why this is so interesting is because Boston University, a private university, University of Massachusetts, a state university, you can literally, as a UMass student, take classes at Boston University. So you are literally taking exactly the same class, but not paying the same amount for it. So there is a huge amount to unpack in this situation. But as Bash has said, you might not be able to use all of those three strategies all at the same time. So a low cost of living might not also come hand in hand with lots of funding available, or lots of funding available may not mean that you can then look for low tuition scholarship at the same, low tuition university at the same time. So it can be sometimes a trade-off between those three things. Okay, so just having to think about some of those other funding examples and how to identify funding opportunities. So again, beyond personal and family funding, some of the best funding comes from the universities themselves. And so for university funding, some of the best resources is going to be the university website. Have a look at the department website, have a look at the funding opportunities there, have a look at the individual programs and are there pages about funding related to that individual program. And you can even go and have a look if there is funding available at the overall graduate school. So that's the part of the university that deals with all the kind of graduate programs all in one go. Have a look at the financial aid pages. There's often information there. So it might be visiting lots of different parts of these websites, but checking and making sure that you've identified any potential funding opportunities, just in case they're not being all advertised on just one page. So once you start to see these funding opportunities, that's the next thing you want to do, is start to interrogate them. What do they say? Do they have much funding available? Universities try and generally give you an accurate but conservative measure about how much funding they offer. So you want to be starting to look for the language that they're using. Are they talking about limited funding availability for the most talented students? Or perhaps they are saying generous scholarships available to international applicants. Those two different phrases will give you a sense of perhaps the different directions that they're going in. If this information isn't available online, it might even suggest that they can't offer a lot of financial support, but it's really worth getting in touch with the department administrator or the director to inquire. You might want to be thinking about whether you would actually be competitive for funding at that particular institution. Often funding will go to the best applicants in the application pool. So you want to be thinking about your profile and how you might stack up against other people. If it's an incredibly selective program and you are just thinking you might be able to scrape in, you may find that you're not going to be selected for funding. You might want to be asking current students how competitive the funding is. Really, is it that competitive? And you could also ask them if they've got something like an assistantship where they're helping as a kind of part of their funding, they're helping with the teaching. What does their assistantship involve? What's the work-life balance like? Really get the inside scoop in this process. You also want to be looking at how many assistantships are there available. Are they full, as in they cover all the cost, or are they partial, when you're expected to make up part of it? If possible, you want to find out what basis they award assistantships. Is it academic merit? Is it something else? Perhaps, sometimes assistantships and scholarships might be based on, you are a female applicant to an MBA program, for example. Is an admissions test score factored into it, or is it on the basis of your other academics or prior experience? All of these things are factors. The more questions you can ask, the better. And you might want to find out if there are any extra requirements you need to fulfill to be considered for an assistantship or fellowship. You might be automatically considered, but in some cases you might need to submit an extra essay or a resume or a particular application to be part of it. So you might be wondering, what does this look like? And we're now going to have a look at an example of the kind of thing that you can be looking out for. So this is the website of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. It's one of the top public universities in the United States. It is known for its research. And we've highlighted some of the key points about fellowships and assistantships and how to identify when a university has funding available. So this is from the Department of Political Science web pages. And you can see that alongside their graduate program, they've got some various different breakdowns on the left-hand side. And then you can see they have a page about fellowships and assistantships. And it says here, most students in the Department of Political Science are supported by fellowships and assistantships. That's great to know. Means that there's lots of funding available. Graduate students in political science are also eligible for a variety of competitive university-wide fellowships. Hey, there's even more money, even beyond the department. That's great too. And you can see some more information there. You can see more information you can see at the bottom it says, it is worth noting that Chapel Hill is a highly livable college town with a low cost of living. So again, it's a university that is recognising the costs of living and what graduate students are looking for in a city like Chapel Hill. So you've got some real indicators just from this one department website. This is the kind of language that you might be looking for if you are looking for funding from a university. Okay, so next area of funding we were talking about was this idea of external funding. And as Basha said, this isn't coming from a university, this is coming from a wide range of organisations, charities, foundations, government organisations. It can come from companies, businesses, anything like that. All of this is what we would call external funding. And sometimes these funding opportunities can be relatively small, and sometimes they can be much larger, perhaps covering all of the tuition, sometimes even more generous than that. And you might be wondering what kinds of organisations offer these kinds of funding. And you might be surprised to learn that Fulbright, the Fulbright Commission, where Basha and I work, is actually an external funding body. We offer something called the Fulbright Awards, which are scholarships for graduate level students at either master's or PhD level, or at scholar level, to go from the UK to the United States and study at any accredited university in the US for those programs. So they're a really cool opportunity, and we're going to talk about them more a little bit later. But I just wanted to flag that this kind of external funding is out there. So you're going to hear about the Fulbright Awards. We've got our colleague who'll be joining us later on to talk about that. But I also just wanted to highlight just some of the other scholarships available. So here I have some different examples of just some of the scholarships available just for UK students alone. There are far more open to you as potentially an international student studying in the United States, or even open to domestic students too. So on this screen, you've got the Fulbright Commission, but we've also got scholarships available from particular foundations linked to particular universities, so someone like the Thuron Awards or the Kennedy Awards. These are linked to a specific university or universities and help people go and study at those universities. You've also got places like the British Association of American Studies, who have a scholarship with the University of Wyoming. So again, you might find that there are charities and other organisations out there offering funding that can help you get there. I also want to just highlight BUNAC on this. BUNAC is an organisation that helps people be mobile and work in the US and other countries. BUNAC offers a scholarship. This is a really good example. It's not a scholarship that covers the whole cost of a university degree, but it does offer some funding towards travel expenses. So what you can start to do is stack scholarships one on top of another. So if you can find them, you can qualify for them. So if you have a look on our website, we've got a huge list of different places to go and have a look for this external funding. And like I say, it can be charities, companies, all sorts of organisations who offer it, and on all sorts of different criteria. So that could be, you know, your field of study, it could be on personal characteristics, perhaps your gender, perhaps your ethnicity or cultural identity, perhaps it's based on, you know, a particular school that you went to or something like that. There's all sorts of scholarships out there, so it's really worth having a look around. And like I said, we're going to be talking more about the Fulbright scholarships at the end of this presentation as well. Okay, so what are our top tips? If you need funding, here's my top tips for postgraduate study funding tips. So as we said, start early. Early bird catches the worm. A lot of funding opportunities will have early deadlines. Perhaps it's an MBA program, they'll have admissions rounds, and to be considered for a scholarship, you need to apply in the first or second round. Make sure that you are on top of that, do your research, make sure that you're starting early, and be willing to put in that extra time and effort. It is a bit of a slog at times, but I really encourage you to put that time in because it can really pay off at the end. The next thing I'd say is be flexible in choosing your universities. We see so many people who come in with a really fixed view about what they're looking for, and perhaps they're then blinkered to some of the best institutions for their particular discipline even. So it's about being open-minded, having a look at the different programs, and really thinking about where strategically you're going to be a good fit from a funding perspective, and making sure that you're being open-minded about the universities that you're looking at and about the programs you're looking at. You also want to be thinking about how you can be smart on this. So you want to be thinking about how you can minimize your upfront costs. You know, have a look around, make sure that you're thinking about the funding that's available, and you're thinking about the cost of applying to graduate programs. You may well find that there are application fees, so you want to be thinking about how you can use that, and how you can find places where the cost of living is going to make it much more affordable. And then finally, I just want to mention that you want to be thinking about when you're actually in the US, how can you kind of gain financial assistance when you're in the US? And to get a student visa to the United States, you're going to need to reassure the visa office that you have funding in place, either in the form of fellowships and assistantships from the university, or letters of offering kind of assistantship or fellowship funding from external funding bodies. You might need to show bank statements, things like that. So before you can get a visa, you need to be able to show that you have the funding in place for your studies. So that's really important. Once in the United States, there is opportunities to take on work, including through assistantships, or, you know, whether that could be teaching assistantships or working in a lab. But you just want to be aware that you're going to have limits on the amount of time that you can work as an international student, and just be aware that that shouldn't be the kind of primary way that you are funding your studies. Okay. I am handing back over to Basha.
Thank you, Rowena. So how do you go about completing an application once you narrow down your choices? We're going to guide you through the process of how to determine your fit at a particular university and program. And we'd like to reiterate that doing that in-depth research in the choosing process is very important. So when you get familiar with the programs you're looking at, you could then put together the most competitive application possible for them. And the more competitive your application, the better your chances are at securing funding. So once again, the more time you spend in the research process, the more benefit it will bring you in the application and funding process at the end. So in this section, I'm going to bring you through the main components of completing an application. Next slide, please. So what are they looking for? Well, the detail actually vary in the program applications. So, for example, the application for an MBA will be completely different than for molecular physics, for example. Universities will look for your academic achievement. So they would be something that's measured by your undergraduate, or if applicable, your postgraduate degree results here in the UK, and also admissions test scores if those are required for the program that you will be putting an application for. Now, most universities want to see at least a 2.2 on a bachelor's degree, but we suggest that you contact individual departments or programs to see whether your qualifications are sufficient to be considered for admissions. Now, they won't have strict entry requirements, but they should be able to give you an approximate idea of whether your academic profile is roughly in line with their usual admitted student. You might also be able to find that information on their website as well, but if you can't, just contact the department. Now, they also look at the academic fit, which is very important in the US. So they want to know what your reasons for pursuing a postgraduate degree at their institution is and how it will help towards your goal. So why University of Massachusetts and not Boston University? You know, they want to know why you picked their institution and what are your reasons for it. They also look at relevant work experience or coursework that you have, and your extracurricular involvement. So US universities want to see a pattern of relevant work or study experience that lie a strong academic and practical foundation for your studies. They also want to see what your ability and interest is in being involved both in and outside the classroom. So the US campuses are very lively, and they want to see how your personality will fit in their university, and that has to come in through your application process as well. And they might also want to know why you want to study in the US specifically. Why not in the UK or somewhere else in Europe? So it's very important that you put that through in your application, and you show them why the US specifically. Next slide, please. So what are some of the application components that you will have to deal with? In the US, there is no standard process for applications, so this will vary by university and even by department. And each university and department will set its own deadlines and application requirements. So it's important that maybe you create a spreadsheet, like Karina mentioned before, and just keep track of when the deadlines and application requirements are due. Now, most applications will follow a similar format, so you might be able to reuse or adapt some of the materials you prepared for each application or each university. So most will include things like an application form with your basic information. You might be required to give admissions test scores for certain programs, and these will be sent directly to the university by the organization that administered the test. So it's important to make sure that if there are any admission tests required, you know when the dates are or the deadlines for those tests as well. You'll also need to submit a transcript. So this is a list of your academic marks, and you could usually get that from your department or university or registrar's office at the university from your undergrad or master's department. You will also be required to submit a personal statement. So this will describe things like your academic interests, your professional and personal goals, any relevant work experience. It's an opportunity basically to put forth any personal history or put in context and sell yourself to the program and why you would be a good fit for that program. You might be required to also submit 2 to 3 letters of recommendations, and the university might provide some loose guidelines for selecting your referees. Maybe they might want 1 letter from an academic or professional referee. But make sure that you choose someone who knows you well, both so professionally or academically as well as personally. It's important that that referee also brings out your personality as well, not just you know, how well you've done academically. You might be required to put a CV or resume together with a list of your professional and extracurricular accomplishments. And you might be required to have an interview, especially if you're applying for something like the MBA. Some research degrees occasionally will do an interview, but once again, this will be depending on the program you apply for. If you're applying for a program in the arts, you might likely be required to have an audition or send an audition tape. And art students may also be required to submit a portfolio of work. Some students applying for research-focused degrees might be asked to submit a writing sample as well. And finally, there might also be an application fee. So that's usually between $50 to $150 per application. So keep that in mind when you're putting all the costs together as well, especially if you're applying to more than 1 program or university. Next slide, please. So one thing you want to think about when you're choosing the university and the program is, how does your academic profile compare to other applicants? So how do universities measure you up compared to other potential students? So you might want to consider your grades and your UK qualifications. How do those compare to their current students or the potential students that will be applying there? Once again, they might look at the test scores if those are required. And what test scores did you get? Is it high enough compared to other students? Once again, most of that information can be found on the website of the university, but if it's not there, it's always good to reach out to see if academically you meet those criteria. What research have you done or will you do? What was your dissertation as part of your undergraduate degree? Does it fit in with what the university does? Do you have any work experience? So some programs such as the MBA, they look at your work experience, and it's very important to showcase that. In other programs, work experience might not be so important. And the last thing is the X factor. So is there anything that makes you stand out to determine where you would like whether you'll be accepted or you'll be competitive for funding at that university and for that program? As an international student, I don't know, maybe you had a really unique undergraduate program. Maybe you can make a strong case as to why you would bring something unique to their program. What makes you different? What is that X factor that makes you stand out from other applications? Universities are always looking for an interesting mix of ideas and people on their program. They just don't want the same student, applying over and over. They want people that are unique and different in order to make the university a more unique place and more attractive as well. And I'm gonna hand it over to Rowena now.
Lovely, thank you so much, Basha. Okay, so moving on from your academic profile, another part of the application you might be needing to think about is to think about if you are going to require any in particular admissions exams or admissions tests. So these admissions tests act as a method of evaluating different applicants, especially because in the US, different degrees can be at undergrad level, can be run very differently. And it is also a way of leveling the playing field a bit. And for universities to kind of measure and quantify different applicants against each other. So you might find that some of the programs that you're looking at may be looking for admissions exams, and this will be set out on their website. So different admissions exams available. So the most common one at graduate level is going to be known as the GRE. That's like the general test. It covers your verbal reasoning, your quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and your analytical writing skills, all things that most graduate programs are going to be looking for, perhaps in different levels. So if you're looking at an arts and humanities program, they may not put as much emphasis on the quantitative reasoning skills that you've demonstrated in the exam, but they might spend more time looking at analytical writing. Likewise, you might find that perhaps more STEM subjects might be more interested in some of those other parts of an exam. So the GRE is the most common exam asked for, but then there are specifically, and especially for most master's programs and often PhD programs, but there are other exams that you might see popping up. So for example, GMAT is the specific admissions exam used by business schools to assess particularly MBA programs. You might see the LSAT coming up if you're looking at JD programs, which are the law programs. You might be looking at the MCAT, which is for MD medicine programs and medical admissions. So these exams pop up, and if a university is asking for them, they will put that on their website. So it's part of your research is understanding what do you need to complete an application. Do you need to submit admissions exams? Not all universities will require them, but some programs, and particularly the most competitive programs, may well ask for them. It's also worth just thinking about these exams are really quite different to what we're used to here in the UK. It's a much more of an American thing. So just be aware that you want to practice and test for these. So you can Google all sorts of resources. There's all sorts of classes you can watch for free on YouTube. You can buy books. You can even hire a tutor to help you through these tests if you want to. There's a full range of opportunities out there. But just being aware that they are really quite different. They're multiple choice questions, and there is strict time limits. Different tests work in different ways. For example, the GMAT is adaptive, so if you don't do as well on questions, then they start giving you easier questions, but that affects your score, whereas others will be much more linear and will ask a series of questions that increase in difficulty. And again, some of this is about kind of the psychology of exam taking and making sure that you've really prepared if you're going to take one of these exams. So how important are these standardized tests in an admissions decision? Is this the be all or end all? Is this what makes a decision as to whether you're in or not? It's a really hard question to answer, but what I just say is it depends on the program, on the department, on the university. So some universities do not require these exams at all. For others, it might factor into their decision, but they're much more interested actually in your personal statement and your transcript that you've submitted. It could well be that some more programs will be more interested in your analytical writing and your verbal reasoning scores than how you did in the quant section. It really does depend on the program and on the department. And you could, as you research up different programs, you could be asking about how much weight is given to a standardized test score along the process. So you want to make sure that you understand what test you need to take. I'm not in the business of advising anyone to take exams they don't need to do. So make sure you know if you need to take an exam and exactly which exam would be accepted. And then you want to have a look at each university, each program, and make sure that information is the same, because there will be differences between individual programs that you're looking at. You want to also make sure that you're really looking at those deadlines for application. Do you need to have that admissions exam score in time to apply, in which case that's going to influence how you prepare for the exam, how you prepare for that test. When are you doing your prep? Are you going to get the test score back in time in order that you can submit it? So make sure that you're planning for that as well. You also want to be thinking ahead a little bit as well, and really thinking a little bit ahead and thinking about how you're going to prepare, how you're going to find the resources that you need. You want to make sure that you're thinking ahead to register early for your exams. You want to make sure that you're not leaving it till the last moment to register, because it may well be your chosen test centre is full by then. And you may want to give yourself an opportunity to retake the exam if that is something you want to do. Perhaps the first time doesn't go so well. So again, it's all about getting organised and researching ahead of time. You want to make sure you properly prepare and that you're prepared for this exam. There's all sorts of resources out there, so do have a look around for those. And you may well find that many of these exams, particularly post-COVID, are offered at home, so that might be something that you can look into as well. Okay, next part of an application will be the personal statement. And this is one of the most important parts of an application to a US graduate program. So if you've done an undergraduate degree in the UK, please banish any ideas of your UCAS personal statement or anything like that. It's quite a different document to the kinds of information that we prepare here in the UK. But it is a real opportunity to showcase yourself and to show what you could bring to a graduate program. So it's not an in-depth research proposal. So some universities may ask for separate research statements in addition to the personal statement. And those separate research proposals or statements will outline your research interests and your future plans. This is quite a different document. What they are looking for is to understand that you understand the program and that you kind of have a sense of why you want to do the program, how it fits in with your career or academic career trajectory. It might ask you to think about how these pieces bring together what kind of person you are, perspective on the world, and how that brings together and what you will offer then to the university. So it can be really important to illustrate your motivations for studying on that particular program. And then you also want to be able to use it to describe your academic fit. So that's an opportunity for you to showcase smartly the research that you've done about that particular program and why you're excited about it, and to describe how that is going to meet your needs, but also what you can bring and offer to the university as well. So I just want to highlight a few writing tips. There isn't necessarily a set structure normally for a personal statement unless the university prompts you for one. So you have an opportunity to be a little bit creative and stand out. And what's quite common in US personal statements from US students is to start with perhaps some kind of anecdote describing something momentous to them. So it could be the moment that they discovered this particular field of study, perhaps as a child or a teenager or in their undergraduate studies, that kind of, wow, this is the moment. They might start with that and then use that to kind of lead into their passion and their interest in this particular area of study. Some other people might use a central theme to link and describe those different experiences and their future plans and bring that all together as part of their studies and their career. My other top tip would be, please, if you're from the UK, please don't be reserved. Don't be too British about this statement. It can feel almost a little bit uncomfortable to be a bit gushy about it, about yourself, but know that this is an opportunity to kind of sell yourself to the program. So there's lots more tips on our website, so including some examples of the kinds of things we're talking about here. So please do go and check those out on our website as well. Right, next part of an application will be the letters of recommendation. So you're likely going to need to provide 2 or 3 letters of recommendation that will support your application. And so you want to have a think about who would be a good recommender for you. And it depends perhaps on which type of program you're applying to. Some universities and some programs may give guidance that they're looking for, you know, perhaps if it's an MBA program, they're looking for your current line manager, and then perhaps 2 other people that they're asking for. So there might be a specific, we want your line manager. It could be, you know, a current professor that they're asking for or something like that. Or they could specify, you know, it's got to be an academic or professional referee. So you want to have a think about who is going to be the best fit for you. And you want to think about people who maybe know you well, both in and out of the classroom. So if you're in an undergraduate degree currently, and you're looking to apply to a graduate program, a master's in the US, you might want to be thinking, are there any faculty that particularly know you, where you've made great contributions in class, who enjoyed your reading and writing, and perhaps even have more of a personal relationship with you than someone who you sat at the back of their classroom and they don't know you at all. You want to find referees that are going to complement each other. So perhaps giving a different perspective on you as an applicant each time. Get that good balance, classroom versus professional, research versus extracurricular, trying to build up an overall picture of you. But these documents really are a marketing tool for you as an applicant. So again, we would really encourage your referee to have a think about how they can represent you really well. We've got some guidance on our website for people who are writing recommendation letters for US universities to understand what they need to produce. You can meet with your referee before they write a letter about you. So you can sit down and talk about the letter. You can perhaps give them a copy of your CV or your application. Maybe you can tell them about your reasons for wanting to study this program, and particularly in your field. You could list some of your research that you've done, excite them a little bit about the opportunity, and that will come then through when they sit down to write that letter. So you just want to make sure your referee is also aware of any deadlines or paperwork deadlines that they need to follow through on as well. Okay, so we've come to towards the end of our webinar this evening. We've talked about choosing universities. We've talked about some of the reasons why people from the UK study at US universities. We've talked about funding US universities, and we've talked about applying to US universities. And we've got a little bit more to share with you, including some information about the Fulbright Awards, our scholarships here at the Fulbright Commission. So that's coming, so hang on here, and then we will do a Q&A. So if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. I've already answered a couple of them by typing out answers, so please feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A box, and then we can make sure we answer them at the end of this section. So how can we help you if you want to take your interest in studying in the US further? Here are a few ways to help you. Do go and have a little look at our website. That's Fulbright.org.uk. Fulbright has got one L. Go and visit our website for advice. We've got loads of free guides to how to study in the United States at graduate level. So you can just go into the Going to the USA section, into the postgraduate guide, and you can find all the information, loads of links on choosing, funding, applying to US universities. And then you can also find information about the Fulbright Awards on our website too. Lots of information about all the different awards, and we'll talk about those in a second. You can also have a look at booking a one-to-one video appointment with an advisor. Basha and I both make ourselves available for video appointments. You can find out information on that on our website. You can also drop us an email if you've got questions. We're more than happy to answer emails. So you can email us at advising@fulbright.org.uk, or you can find information on the website both about how to book a video appointment or to get in touch with us via email. We're super here to help, and our appointments and advice will always be offered for free. Okay, we also hold a whole load of events about studying in the US, both online and in person. So please just keep an eye on the events section of our website to find out more about these. Okay, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Angelina, who I hope is joining us to share a bit more information about the Fulbright Awards. Over to you, Angelina.
Sure. So first of all, Rowena and Basha, thank you so much for inviting me to join you tonight. So my name is Angelina. I'm a member of the Fulbright Awards team, and I work specifically with the UK grantees who go to the US to study towards a postgraduate qualification. So I'm going to talk about the Fulbright Awards very, very briefly tonight. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Fulbright Awards, who have never heard about it, we are a scholarship program. We fund UK grantees who go to the US to study, to teach, to research, and we also welcome students and academics from the US. So with regard to the awards which we offer to UK citizens and UK residents, we have a variety of awards. So some of them are quite broad. So for instance, our most competitive award is called the All Disciplines. And the reason why it's most competitive is because it can be taken up in any academic discipline at any institution in the US towards any postgraduate studies. So obviously that attracts a lot of applications. Other awards may be specific to an academic area, but again, they can be taken up at any institution in the US, for instance, the Elsevier Data Analysis Award. And finally, we have other awards which are quite niche in the sense that we offer them in partnership with a specific US institution for a specific program. So for example, if you are interested in studying law, we have a fully funded award with Indiana University. And obviously, the more specific the award is, the less competitive it is. So it's one of the tips if you're thinking about applying for Fulbright. If you're interested, go and have a look at our website. We are opening the competition very soon. So the awards catalogue has already been updated, and we'll be offering 10 awards. So that information is up to date. Another thing I wanted to mention very briefly is the 2 placement options, and this is something relatively new. So this is going to be the second year we're offering something we call the IE placements. So Bash and Rowena have spoken a lot about the importance of finding the academic fit, making sure that you know when the deadlines are, what you need to do, what tests you need to sit, what application fees you need to pay. So really, this is a lot of information and a lot of steps you will be expected to follow. If you want to do that independently, if you know exactly where you're going, you're not flexible, you're going to those particular institutions, and you want to sort of place yourself independently, so you will be going through all those processes on your own, you can absolutely do that, and you then apply for Fulbright in parallel with securing a place at your selected US institution. And this is what we call independent placements, because we do not provide any support to you. The other placement option is the IE placements, and this is the new service we're offering now. So this is for those of you who know what you want to do, but you're not quite sure how to navigate the whole education system in the US. You may not exactly know where exactly you're going in terms of the institution, and you would like to get some support. So for those of you who are in that situation, if you go through the Fulbright award selection process, if you're offered an award, you are then paired with one of our colleagues who is based in the US, and they will find a selection of programs based obviously on your academic aspirations, but also your financial circumstances. So that service, in addition to the academic advice, also includes things like we cover all application fees, we cover all test fees, and what Rowena has just been talking about, all the deadlines, all the interviews, everything you need to do, your placement advisor will be going through that with you. They will be reminding you about the deadlines, they will be telling you when to submit different things, they will be submitting a lot of information on your behalf. So really, it's a really fantastic service, and you do not need to pay anything for that. So this is part of the IE placement service. So the most important thing today is the fact that we're opening the competition in 2 weeks. So our plan is to open the competition on the 1st of February. If that does not happen, we're going to open it in early February regardless. And this is for the academic year of 24-25. So it's next academic year. If you're planning to start your postgraduate qualification this year, so in autumn 23, on a Fulbright award, unfortunately you are too late. So we closed the competition last year. So this is something to keep in mind. If you're interested, if you would like to find out more about our program, go and have a look at the website, but also, again, as Rowena has mentioned, keep an eye on the events website, because we will be scheduling webinars which are dedicated specifically to the Fulbright Awards, what we offer, the different placement types, how to submit a competitive application. So a lot of information which focuses specifically on the Fulbright Awards, and we will be doing that in February, March, and April. Also, depending on your institution, your university may have a Fulbright champion. A Fulbright champion is somebody who's a member of staff on campus, and they are familiar with the Fulbright Awards program. So if your institution does have a Fulbright champion, please reach out to us. We can check that for you, and we can put you in contact with them, and they will be able to help you with the whole application process. And the final thing I wanted to very briefly mention is we also have Fulbright ambassadors. So these are either our current grantees who are in the US, or our recent alumni who have come back from the US. You can chat to them via our website and ask any questions about their Fulbright experience specifically, or anything about applying to a US institution, studying in the US, going to the US. So they will be very happy to help you. So this is everything I wanted to cover today, and if you have any questions, I will be very happy to take them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Angelina, for that as well. Passing back over to Basha now.
We do have a few questions. So some of the questions, Angelina, this one you might be able to answer, but how many applicants do you usually receive in total, and what is the typical rate of acceptance?
I get this question every year, and it's the same answer. Unfortunately, we do not share this information, because this really depends on the award you're applying for. So what I can say is that we always recommend looking at our what we call partner awards. So everything which is not all disciplines, because those are less competitive, and we can be looking at anything between, I would say, up to 10 applications per award to 20-30 applications per award. So again, this is like general numbers. It really does depend. Okay. And if you would like to find out more in terms of like how many awards we award every year, you can have a look at the website. Again, it depends, but it's normally our cohort is between, I would say, 20 and 25 grantees.
Great. So how would you suggest to go about seeking out and securing assistantships? Maybe Rowena can answer that one.
Yeah, great question. So assistantships are offered by the university or by the department that you're applying to, and these are funding that comes in return for you taking on duties within that department. So those could be working in a research lab or alongside a professor, or it could be taking on perhaps supporting teaching of undergraduate students at the university. So these can be really great funding opportunities to help cover the costs of studying at a US university. Some assistantships might cover the full tuition. Some might even cover tuition plus a stipend, which is like a contribution towards your living costs. So it's worth having a look at those. You'll find them on university websites, and you'll find them normally listed as the funding opportunities. So under a page perhaps called assistantships and fellowships, and you can look for them there. What I would do if it were me is I would be looking, you know, it's another early bird catches the worm. So you want to be early on in the cycle of admissions, and perhaps reaching out to connect with the administrator who's looking after admissions to that program. Perhaps ask if there's any tips or advice that they have if you're applying for an assistantship. And you really want to perhaps emphasize, you know, if you're looking for an assistantship that is supporting undergraduate teaching, perhaps maybe you'll be running a section or something like that. It's such an amazing experience in terms of if you're looking to build an academic career. You might want to have a think about the kinds of skills that you think might be applicable in that situation. So you might be thinking about times where you've supported somebody else in their learning journey, or maybe kind of empathy and understanding, things like that. So even if you haven't directly done the work that the assistantship is asking you to do, I think just like a job interview, you can show how previous experiences can put you in the right spot to be a good assistantship. It'd be good for that assistantship. So that's kind of how I would approach it, is looking at the university, looking at the department, reaching out, making the most of the resources available, and then having a think about how you can demonstrate that you would be great you'd be great for an assistantship. So that's how I go about it.
Great, thanks, Rowena. Angelina, this one's for you. Is someone eligible for the Fulbright Awards if they are not a British citizen, but they have indefinite leave to remain in the UK?
The short answer is yes. Please do go and have a look at the information on our website. There are specific conditions. So if you are in the UK not on a student visa, you may be eligible, but you will need to get some information from your home, from the Fulbright Commission in your home country. But the short answer is yes.
Okay, another one is, am I able to start my visa application without having the funding approved yet? I think maybe Rowena, you might want to take that one.
Yeah, good question. So to be able to start a visa application, you're going to need documentation from the university, from the program where you've had your place accepted, and you could start like paying the fees and start the initial paperwork, electronic paperwork, but you're not going to get a visa and satisfy the American embassy that you have the funding in place if you haven't got that funding in place. So you're going to need to demonstrate it. And the process of normally starting your visa to going to your visa interview is a relatively short period. So if you haven't figured it out, I would probably put the visa application down and make sure that you've figured out the funding piece, rather than trying to jump into trying to start a visa process, because I think your time is probably better spent making sure that you've got the funding all lined up and you can demonstrate all of that first. Depends on the time of year how long student visas take to get approved, but normally if you kind of work through the paperwork correctly and you've got all the right documentation, it can depend. If it's at the peak season, it can take longer, but I normally see people in the going through that process relatively swiftly, and so just being aware that it's a fairly quick process, and so getting that funding in place is key and important before you get to the visa process.
Great, thank you. Angelina, just quickly, can you just confirm that if you're on the IIE placement model, that you consider the institution later on in the process? Is that correct?
So the way it works is your advisor will recommend a number of institutions, and very often I would say it's up to 10, and then the two of you will need to agree on the final 4. So in a way, it's not so you don't need to do any research, you do not need to identify those institutions in advance, but you will need to select something from that list which your placement advisor will offer to you.
Great, thank you. And then just one more question is there ever a situation when you are awarded the Fulbright Award, but then you do not get offered a place at the American university that you applied to?
Yes, we've had those situations. And we've had situations when people had to withdraw from the process because they didn't want to go anywhere else. So they were very set on going to a particular institution, they weren't unsuccessful. With the IE placements, this is actually the first year we are running it. We haven't had a situation like that yet. And what I've heard from my colleagues in other countries is that the benefit of going through the IE is that they, even if 4 options fall through, which happens incredibly rarely, normally they manage to find something quite last minute, so they can still suggest something else if you are unsuccessful. But this is something they take into account when recommending those 4 institutions to you in the first place.
And just one more question is, can you suggest, as in, can the person suggest institutions to the advisor as well if they're on the IIE program or pathway?
Yes, absolutely. And we very much encourage our grantees to do so. And I'm actually working with a number of grantees now who are going through the IE placement. And I would say more than half of them kind of came to the first conversation with their IE placement advisor prepared, so they had some suggestions. And in most cases, IE advisors include at least one of those institutions in their sort of final kind of recommended selection of programs.
That's great. Thank you, Angelina. Thank you so much for joining us. Those are all the questions that we have. However, if there is something that we haven't answered or you have any more questions, please do email us. We're happy to answer any and every question there is and give you any advice that we can. And once again, we'd like to thank you for joining us this evening. And we hope you have great rest of the week and great weekend coming up.